Alara sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the window that framed the gray morning sky. Clouds had swallowed the sun, and the air was thick with the kind of silence that made you feel like the world had forgotten you. 24 years old and stuck in a cycle she didn't know how to escape. She lived above a bakery, in a rented room that smelled like old books and burnt sugar. Her job as a cashier at a grocery store paid just enough to cover rent and food. The rest her dreams, her passions, her joy had withered away like flowers in a drought. She had once wanted to be a singer, then a writer, then maybe a traveler. But all those dreams had been carefully tucked away in a box labeled someday, and someday never seemed to arrive. I don't belong to anything, she whispered into the room. The alarm buzzed again. She turned it off, pulled her coat on, and went to face the world with the same tired mask she wore every day. That evening, Alara found herself at the park, her feet wandering without purpose. She sat on an old wooden bench beneath a sycamore tree that had shed most of its leaves. People passed by, a couple laughing, children playing with a dog, an elderly man feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons. Alara watched them with a dull ache in her chest. She wondered how they found joy so easily when she felt like a stone at the bottom of a well. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" a voice said beside her. She turned, startled. An old woman had taken the seat next to her. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a coat with purple embroidery. Her eyes were sharp, bright, like they had seen both darkness and light and chose to dance anyway. "I guess," Alara replied, "and sure. You don't sound convinced," the woman smiled. Alara sighed. "It's hard to find beauty in a day when you feel invisible." The woman nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you need to look not with your eyes, but with your thoughts." Alara frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small mirror. She held it up gently, facing Alara. "Your thoughts are seeds. What you plant, you grow. If you only water worrying and doubt, your life becomes a garden of weeds. But if you plant hope and faith, you can grow a forest of light." Alara stared into her own eyes in the mirror. She looked tired and certain, but behind that, a small flicker remained, like the last spark of a fire waiting to be rekindled. "Say this," the woman said softly. "Say, I am not broken. I am becoming." Alara hesitated. "What difference will it make?" The woman smiled. "All the difference in the world." So Alara whispered, for the first time, "I am not broken. I am becoming." And the wine seemed to sigh in approval. The next morning, Alara stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair. The encounter with the woman felt surreal, like a scene from a dream, but the words had clung to her. "I am not broken. I am becoming." Alara hesitated. "What difference will it make?" The woman smiled. "All the difference in the world." So Alara whispered, for the first time, "I am not broken. I am becoming." And the wine seemed to sigh in approval. The next morning, Alara stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair. The encounter with the woman felt surreal, like a scene from a dream, but the words had clung to her. "I am not broken. I am becoming." She whispered them again, then louder. She wrote them on a sticky note and placed it on the mirror. That day at work, something small but unusual happened. She smiled at a customer, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The customer smiled back. It was such a small thing, but it warmed her. After work, instead of going straight home, she stopped at the library. She hadn't been there in years. She wandered through the shelves and picked up a book on positive psychology, then another on healing the mind through thoughts. She learned that the brain had something called neuroplasticity, the power to change and adapt based on what we focus on. The more she thought positively, the more her brain would rewire itself. It sounded too good to be true. But something deep inside her, the place where dreams slept, began to stir. Days turned into weeks, and Alara kept planning thoughts. She read affirmations on index cards. I deserve to be happy. I am learning to love life again. I am stronger than my fear. She placed them around her room, on her mirror, her door, her fridge. She even taped one inside her wallet. My thoughts create my reality. The more she repeated them, the more she started believing them. And the more she believed, the more her world began to shift. She noticed beauty in places she'd ignored before: the golden sunlight on bricks, the laughter of a child, the smell of fresh bread wafting up through her floor. One evening, she found her old sketchpad. She hadn't drawn in years, but she opened it and began to doodle. What began as messy lines turned into flowers, stars, and light beams. Her hands remembered, her heart remembered. Creativity had not left her, it had simply been waiting. With her confidence growing, Alara made a bold decision. She started a blog. She called it Becoming Alara. Her first post was titled, "I Am Not Broken." She wrote about the park bench, the old woman, and how she'd started changing her thoughts. At first, only a handful of people read it: friends from school, a coworker, a cousin. But she kept writing. Every week, she posted stories about healing, hope, growth, and small victories. She shared her drawings, her favorite quotes, her affirmations. One day, a stranger from Spain left a comment. "Thank you. I've been battling depression, and your words helped me breathe again." Alara stared at the screen for minutes, tears in her eyes. Her thoughts were not just changing her life, they were touching others too. But as in every journey, life tested her again. Her mother, who lived in another town, called one night with news. She was ill. Tests were needed, appointments booked, and the worrying in her mother's voice was undeniable. Alara's paycheck could barely cover her expenses, let alone help her mother. She felt helpless. Fear returned thick and heavy. What if things fall apart again? What if I can't keep this up? She skipped writing for days. She stopped saying her affirmations. She even stopped drawing. The darkness she thought she had escaped came creeping back, until one morning, she opened her sketchpad and saw a drawing she had made of a girl holding a lantern in a dark forest. Under it, she had written, "Even in the dark, we carry our own light." Alara closed her eyes and whispered, "I am not broken. I am becoming." She took a deep breath and made tea. Then she sat down and wrote a new blog post. The post was titled, "How to Breathe When You're Drowning." She shared her fears honestly. She told her readers about her mother's illness and how hard it was to stay positive. She ended the post with a simple line: "Sometimes strength is not pretending to be okay. Sometimes strength is holding on when your hands are shaking." The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments, messages of support, readers sharing their own stories. Some donated money to help with her mother's bills. Others offered prayers, poems, and love. Alara cried, not from sadness but from awe. Her positive thinking had not made her invincible, but it had made her resilient. And that resilience had inspired others to rise with her. Her mother's condition stabilized. With the help of kind souls from her blog, she got the treatment she needed. Alara felt something shift inside her again, a deep, blooming gratitude. She began to wake up excited not for anything extraordinary, but for the possibility of each day. She made a list called My Morning Mind Garden, and it became her ritual. Gratitude: list 3 things she was thankful for. Affirmation: speak a truth she wanted to live. Imagination: visualize something she was working toward. Kindness: do one kind thing, big or small. Reflection: end the day by journaling what went well. She taught this method to her readers. They shared how it helped them wake up with joy even during hard seasons. The garden of Valera's mind had turned from weeds into wildflowers. Months had passed since Alara had written her first blog post. Her following had grown not in millions, but in meaning. She received daily emails from readers in India, Kenya, Brazil, and small towns she had never heard of. They all shared one thing in common: a desire to rise above the weight of their thoughts and believe in life again. Then, one evening, an email arrived that made Alara stare at her screen in disbelief. Subject: Keynote Speaker Invitation, Mindshift Conference 2025. The body of the message was short and polite. A well-known mental health organization had been following her blog and was impressed by her ability to connect through words and emotion. They wanted her to speak at their conference, to share her story in person. She read the email 3 times, her heart beat loud in her ears. Then fear gripped her. Me, speak in front of people. What if I stutter? What if I forget my words? What if I'm not enough? Her chest tightened. She almost deleted the email, but then she remembered. She walked to her mirror, looked herself in the eye, and whispered, "I am not broken. I am becoming." She clicked reply and typed, "Yes, I'd be honored." For the next 3 weeks, Alara practiced her speech every morning. She stood in front of her mirror, speaking to her reflection as if it were the audience. She didn't aim to be perfect. She aimed to be real. Her speech wasn't polished like a TED Talk. It was raw, filled with stories about crying alone in her room, writing affirmations on sticky notes, whispering hope when she felt like screaming. One day, as she rehearsed, she paused and looked into her reflection. The woman looking back at her was no longer hollow-eyed or weighed down by hopelessness. There was light in her eyes, not the blinding kind but the soft, warm kind that makes others feel safe. She smiled and whispered, "You've come so far." The day of the conference arrived. Alara stood backstage, heart racing. She could hear the murmur of the crowd, hundreds of people settling into their seats. A young woman approached her, wearing a headset and clipboard. "You're up in 5 minutes," she said with a warm smile. "You've got this." Alara nodded, holding her note cards tightly. She felt the fear rising again, cold and familiar. But this time, she didn't run. She closed her eyes and said the 5 lines from her morning mind garden. "I am thankful for today. I am enough as I am. I see myself standing in light. I will offer kindness through my voice. Something beautiful will happen today." When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage, legs trembling, but heart steady. She took a deep breath and began. "I wasn't always this person," Alara began. The audience quieted instantly. "I used to cry myself to sleep, believing I was invisible. I used to think hope was for other people, not for someone like me, who had failed too many times, who had lost her way." She told them about the woman on the park bench, the mirror. The first time she whispered, "I am not broken. I am becoming." She spoke of fear, and how it doesn't disappear but becomes quieter when love speaks louder. She shared her affirmations, her blog, her readers' messages that reminded her she was not alone, and neither were they. And then she said, "Positive thinking is not pretending everything is okay. It's choosing to believe that, even when it's not, you have the power to create light." When she finished, the room was silent for a second, then erupted into applause. Alara didn't cry, not because she wasn't moved, but because she felt something deeper. Peace. After the conference, her inbox overflowed with messages of thanks and stories of transformation. But one message stood out. It was from her younger self. Sort of. A woman named Livia had written, "I was you, afraid, alone, convinced I would never matter. Then I found your blog. I read every post. Your words were like stepping stones across a river I thought I would drown in. I'm writing again. I'm living again. Thank you." Alara sat in silence, staring at the screen. Livia's words felt like a letter from the past and future at the same time. As if her pain had never been wasted, it had become the path for someone else's healing. She whispered aloud. This is the power of positive thinking. Inspired by the response to her speech, Alara hosted her first in-person workshop, Rewriting the Mind, a journey in positive thinking. 12 people attended, some shy, some skeptical, all carrying their own stories. She began by handing out mirrors not to stare at, but to speak to. Tell yourself one kind thing, she said. Many hesitated. One man cried. A teenager whispered, I'm proud you didn't give up. They wrote affirmations, shared past wounds, practiced breath work, visualized a future where peace and joy were not fantasy but direction. The room was filled with quiet power. At the end of the workshop, an elderly woman hugged Alara and said, You reminded me that it's not too late to befriend my mind. Despite all her growth, Alara knew there was one thing she had avoided: visiting her childhood home. It held memories she had long buried of a father who left, a mother who worked too hard to smile, and a girl who felt like a burden instead of a blessing. But positive thinking wasn't about denial. It was about courage. So she booked a train, packed a notebook, and went home. The house was smaller than she remembered. The paint peeled, the porch creaked, but inside, her mother welcomed her with a tight embrace. They sat in the kitchen, shared tea, talked honestly. Alara asked questions she had feared to ask. Her mother cried, apologized for the silence. Alara cried too. They didn't fix everything, but they began healing. That night, in her old room, Alara wrote in her notebook, Healing is the final act of positive thinking. Believing that the past does not define the rest of your story. Months turned into a year. Alara's blog became a podcast. Her workshops expanded to cities and schools. She was invited to write a book, but she never lost her ritual. Each morning, she still began with gratitude, affirmation, imagination, kindness, and reflection. Because Alara knew, success was not in how many people followed her but how deeply she followed her own light. And when storms came and they did, she didn't panic. She remembered, I am not broken. I am becoming. One crisp autumn evening, Alara returned to the park. She found the same bench beneath the sycamore tree. A young woman sat there, crying softly. Alara hesitated, then sat beside her. Beautiful evening, isn't it? She said gently. The woman looked at her through tear-filled eyes. I guess. You don't sound convinced, Alara smiled. The girl laughed through her tears. I feel like nothing's going right. Alara reached into her bag and pulled out a small mirror. She handed it over. Your thoughts are seeds. What you plant, you grow. Say this with me. I am not broken. I am becoming. The girl whispered it. Once. Then again. The wine sighed in approval. Alara never called herself a guru or a healer. She always said, I'm just a gardener of the mind. She knew that positive thinking didn't mean ignoring pain. It meant meeting it with softness, with strength, with choice. She had learned that the mind is like soil, it grows what we feed it. And if we dare to plant kindness, hope, courage, and joy even in rocky ground, something beautiful will bloom. Not overnight, but always. You are not broken. You are becoming. Your thoughts are not powerless whispers, they are seeds of a future only you can grow. Choose them wisely, believe in their beauty, and watch as your life becomes the garden it was always meant to be.